working for your money this afternoon.
Yeah, if you have flood insurance, you've probably noticed it's more expensive than it was a year ago.
Experts say that's because FEMA made changes to the federal program within the past year to keep it viable. But barely anyone in Minnesota has flood insurance to begin with. The Insurance Federation of Minnesota says there are less than 10,000 policies a year. So that's a take-up rate of less than 0.1%.
There is a big myth that keeps getting perpetuated out there, even from people in the insurance community. And the myth is that you can't buy flood insurance unless you live in the floodplain. And that's just not true. There's only one requirement to be able to buy flood insurance. Your community has to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program.
So Mark, who you just heard from, says roughly 85% of Minnesota municipalities participate. So we wondered if flood insurance is something you should at least take a closer look at, because of course, the best time to adjust your policy is before you actually need it, in the off season, if you will. So Mark Kulda from the Insurance Federation of Minnesota says many don't have it simply because it can just be a little expensive.
When you look at the statistics from the National Flood Insurance Program, they show that about 1 out of every 3 claims, so about a third of all claims in the flood insurance program, come from people who don't live in the floodplain.
Typical homeowner policies won't cover flood damage. You can get a special endorsement to cover sewer or drain backup, but that's about it. Mark says flood insurance covers flash flooding, so kind of like ponding in your backyard that would seep into your basement. Stuff like that is what it would cover. Not just what we think of like a big spring, flood if you live near a river. It's not, flood insurance isn't just for those people.
I feel like a lot of our stories are not just those people. It's the one where it happens suddenly in their yard. So what can we do if we're looking at our insurance bill wondering, should I look into this now?
Best resource I found, you go to floodsmart.gov and you just plug in your address. You can see if your community participates, because they have to. And then it helps you estimate costs. It tells you where you are in the floodplain too, so you can figure out your risk and at least start a conversation. But I know Mike looked at how the Twin Cities is trending when it comes to heavy rain days.
So this is obviously not a good year necessarily to be thinking flooding, right? Because we're in the midst of a drought, but it's been a pattern with climate change where we have more heavy rain events. And in fact, in the Twin Cities, I want to show you a graphic. The days with 1 inch or more of rainfall over the past 70 years have gone up about 40%. So we've nearly doubled. And also, that's the difference between about 4 days a year with 1 inch or more of rainfall on average and 7.5. That's not like a huge number of days, obviously, but it only takes 1 day where your basement gets flooded to do thousands of dollars of damage.
I did ask too about a city backup, like what we saw in St. Louis Park.
Yes, right.
That would be covered. So that's not a flood insurance situation, but got really granular with it. It's just something we don't think about that I thought would be important to highlight. People can at least
Great point.
have a conversation.